Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Talking Avocados. Today is the 3rd of May here at Irvine. I am Erica and joining me is my co-host Andre.
For the very first episode, we will be talking about the nature of immigration, especially when it comes to public policy and society's attitude towards policy support.
We will specifically discuss Proposition 187 and Proposition 209, particularly targeted denying social services and legalizing affirmative action for university admissions to increase representation of minorities.
Starting with Prop 187, which implemented denying illegal immigrants access to public education and healthcare in non-emergency situations. If a student was suspected to be the child of illegal immigrants, the parent would have to prove their resident status or else the child would not be able to continue attending school.
A similar notion applies to healthcare where physicians and staff are to report if they suspect a patient in an illegal immigrant or even deny them treatment until they prove their resident status.
To discuss more of the events that led to Prop 187 and what is meant for the supporters of this proposition, we were referring to Claudian's paper, The New Politics of Immigration, Balanced Budget Conservatism, and the Symbolism of Proposition 187.
Okay, Calavita makes a valid statement that during an economic crisis, and when there is a major social transformation, especially when there is a major change in the demography of the population, this triggers fear in the majority population in wanting to preserve the American identity and wanting the American population to be less diverse and consist mainly of the white race.
Essentially, the majority population tends to scapegoat immigrants to blame them for their own problems instead of the actual source of the problem, which is what happened in this situation.
Calavita's main argument is that the increase in the immigrant population sparked a desire for nepotism in the majority population, hence, the new restriction placed illegal immigrants to public education and healthcare. Second, the cost of living was gradually increased with blue-collar worker jobs, wages, insufficient to maintain their previous quality of living. Finally, Proposition 187 was a symbolic statement that displayed the majority population frustration and anger towards immigrants about the financial crisis they were experiencing.
Calavita provides a summarization of America's history with immigrants, particularly how they have limited immigration with certain ethnicities due to the belief that one was superior to the other. Eugenics was the biggest contributor as it was a pseudoscience that was based on scientific evidence to breed a human population with desirable characteristics and traits and decrease the population of humans with undesirable characteristics such as disabilities. Eugenics was nothing more than based on racial stereotypes, and this was the reasoning that the Nazis used to justify their genocide against the Jews, the disabled, and other minority groups.
It could be argued that eugenics supported America's desire for nepotism to keep their American identity, which is hypocritical since the country prides itself on being the land of the free and was established by immigrants.
As immigration became rampant, the immigration population was growing exponentially. So, to Americanize immigrants, the government-sponsored classes where immigrants were tasked to learn English, which forced them to develop a sense of patriotism and political conservatism.
Now, time to move on to what sparked the economic crisis was a large contributor to Proposition 187. During World War II, to help increase production rates as thousands and thousands of men were off fighting in the war, America created the Avacado program to bring thousands of Mexican men across the border to work. After the war ended, the men that were in the Avacado program were instantly considered to be illegal immigrants, and the rate of Mexican immigrants to America exploded. They immigrated mainly to the southwestern and western states such as Texas and California, where they worked manual labor jobs as these jobs were abundant.
At this time, blue-collar workers were able to live off their salary decently well, as they were able to afford houses, were considered to be middle class, and could afford to send their own children to university with little to no financial issues. However, when a pool of immigrants came to work in blue-collar or manual labor jobs, employers favored hiring them as they were viewed as a cheaper labor The reason for this was that the employers know that they could not speak up to them about lower wages or unions. Moreover, to their advantage, they were seen as vulnerable groups as they had no roots in the country and needed a job to survive.
The main concern American workers had was that companies would shift to sweatshops in impoverished countries to maximize profits and underpay workers for cheap labor. They were right to be worried as several companies did such things, but there was also a shift in the workplace as industrial jobs were slowly dwindling and there was less need for blue-collar jobs. The American workforce was shifting from industrial jobs as machines and technological advancements at a time placed many manual and manufacturing jobs.
Moreover, increasing foreign competition with these companies, thinking the answer to maximize their profits was to move production abroad, where the workers were afraid to make demands. This resulted in labor cuts, which caused the unemployment rate to double in the 1980s compared to the average unemployment rate in the 50s. If thousands of workers were laid off due to budget cuts, the unemployment rate continued to dwindle in the following years after the 80s. And with budget cuts, the remaining workers who avoided downsizing their annual salaries decreased by 19% since the 30s.
Subsequently, along with the unemployment rate steadily increasing, close to one-third of the workers were contingent workers, meaning that they were either part-time workers or were short-time contracts, showing how the economic situation America was enduring at the time impacted the workforce significantly.
Palavita mentions the term balanced budget conservatism, which means frustration among taxpayers whose attention is focused on the inability of the government to balance the budget. Balanced budget conservatism is applied to the financial crisis which society was struggling to adapt to since for a couple of decades the quality of life had been improving, which developed the mindset many boomers now say how they were able to get a job straight out of high school and they were able to pay for a house and live comfortably off these salaries.
Sadly, this no longer applies to subsequent generations as the economy has had multiple hiccups such as the 2008 recession and currently the inflation rate that has affected the nation since the COVID-19 pandemic has not yet recovered. Moreover, how many millennials and Gen Zs are facing difficulty in finding a stable job in the workforce even after receiving higher education.
Society at this time turned to a different source of the problem, which was the immigration population that they saw as parasites. There were numerous debates as to how much money the immigration population contributed to the country and how much of the taxpayers' money went towards social welfare they used, especially after the federal government cut down the money towards social welfare itself.
The accumulation of increasing employment rates, decreasing in the quality of living, decreasing in annual salaries, and cut towards social welfare was what caused the majority population to scapegoat the immigrant population, seeing them as a financial burden. Hence, when Proposition 187 was announced, people who felt angry and frustrated about the string of events that led up to their economic crisis were all for it.
Fabian says that Prop 187 was a symbolic political statement that was used to project their anger, resentment, and frustration towards the immigrants, plus a message of anger and frustration to Washington over its inability to control immigration. Once Prop 187 was implemented into California law, several other states followed suit to express their resentment and bitterness towards immigrants and the government's incompetence to manage nation's money and control immigration. Now we'll be talking about the thought-provoking topic from Chapter 4 of Adapting to Proposition 209.
Chapter 4 explores the challenges and opportunities presented by Proposition 209, which eliminated affirmative action in California, dismade race, sex, and ethnicity prohibited from public employment, public contracting, and public education, which created crucial changes and impacts within the communities and admission processes.
That's right. One of the major key points of Chapter 4 is how Prop 209 made institutions rethink how they embrace their approach to diversity and inclusion. It sparked conversations about meritocracy versus equality, and it got people to think about whether it's fair to judge someone solely on merits, like standardized testing and grades, or if we should consider factors of their background and how to create an even playing field for everyone.
This playing field was going to need an adaptive approach, which is exactly what the UC systems did to mitigate the implementation of Proposition 209. The comprehensive review was a way for many UC officials to address the underrepresentation problem across UCs, with results of admits under comprehensive review, which was freshman class of fall 2002. They found that the concrete adaptation that UC personnel were trying to make in the study was made in response to Proposition 209.
The high numbers of these adaptations that the UC administrations are making are efforts to mitigate the impact of Proposition 209 and find a way to reach their underrepresented students without violating it.
These anti-affirmative action legislations made most of the UC administrations embrace innovative alternatives for addressing the underrepresentation of their minority populations. This was their adaptive response to reduce concerns and worries of the underrepresentation problems by using comprehensive review and even changing the names of programs or fellowships to have the word minority or diverse made use to target their underrepresented students and shift away from the target of race-based representation to the broader goal of true diversity.
An increase in outreach programs was made at this time to encourage representation by preparing and encouraging high school graduates and community college students to apply to the UC system. The Center of Educational Participation. I gotta restart that.
Keep going.
The Center of Educational Partnerships is a great example of these outreach programs made. They additionally made sure not to use race-oriented language to promote the UC system or its services.
As we speak of the many ways of adaptation each system has been making, there is one that stands out, and that is an organized resource of scholarships, such as the Hispanic Education Endowment Fund, which is made as a community resource to provide scholarships to UC Latino students. This adaptive response was legal, however, it did clash with the mission of equal representation and diversity, as using these criteria and means of addressing underrepresentation only often lead to work with groups that have been targeted in the race-based affirmative action years.
To reduce these concepts, they had asked applicants where they were a part of. To reduce these concepts, they had asked applicants where they were a part of former affirmative action programs like Upward Bound, and allowed a different way of applicants that were underrepresented to be showed and heard, and be a good substitute for inquiring about the student's ethnicity, which has made it equal.
As these adaptations have been made to fight against Proposition 209 and try to mitigate its effects, which has been supportive, there were compliant responses and many systems that had felt hopeless to the cause. UC officials are compliant and felt that mitigating adaptive policies that we have talked about to stop Proposition 209 were not enough to truly address the real dilemma of underrepresentation.
Some departments even started to accept white women under the category of fulfillment for diverse hires, saying that it is a safer option than hiring colored women in the light of the new legal laws under Prop 209. This has started to blur how many academic departments started to choose how to define diversity with the aftermath that had been caused by Prop 209.
As we have talked about the challenges, compliant responses, and barriers that Proposition 209 has caused for communities and admission process, it also paved the way for creative, adaptive, and innovative solutions.
With the implications of outreach programs, scholarships, and support initiatives for underrepresented groups, this should be seen as a win and fight that should still be counted, as these efforts have been significant for creating inclusive environments and fostering diversity.
Exactly. Although there has been progress that we must acknowledge that the fight is far from over, there is more that needs to be done, and it is just a stepping stone to address systemic inequalities and create equitable opportunities for all.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that concludes our podcast. Thank you for joining us today.